We're at an extraordinary moment in our nation's history when the President of the United States has declared a national emergency. One has to go back to the early 1900s, to the Spanish influenza, to find a similar threat, public health threat, to the United States of America. We are in the midst of not just a threat in our own country, but a global coronavirus pandemic. More than 173,000 cases nationwide, and more than 7,300 people have died. What you see today on the floor of the United States Senate is exactly the opposite of what we're being advised as a nation we need to do. What you see today on the floor of the United States Senate are staff people, thank you for being here, protective forces outside the chamber, and others who are invisible to those coming and going that are part of the ordinary business of the United States Senate. You see, we did today what the President has told America we should not do, what medical experts have told us we should not do. We have taken unnecessary airline flights to come here to Washington, D.C. I was on a plane this morning from Springfield, Illinois to Chicago. There were 6 passengers on the plane. Most people are listening to the advice of the medical experts and avoiding unnecessary travel. But unfortunately, we were required to come back today from across the United States. Some members stayed over the weekend because their homes are too far away. Some decided to drive this morning just to be extremely safe. But the fact is, we were asked to take unnecessary airline flights to come back here today and this week, and frankly expose ourselves to the possibility of some public health risk, and ask our staff to do the same. In addition to that, we have been counseled by the leaders, both at the state and federal level, not to gather in groups of more than 10, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. It looks like we're breaking that rule right here on the floor of the Senate. And the obvious question is why? Why would we put ourselves at risk? Why would we put our staff at risk and their families to come back here? Well, there are 2 issues. The first issue was the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which was brought up on the floor of the United States Senate last Thursday, and Senator Lee and Senator Leahy offered the extension of this act for a period of time in return for a few amendments to be debated on the floor. That was rejected. Just minutes ago, what was rejected last Thursday was accepted. We made this trip back here, and it was not necessary. You have to ask yourselves, are we being respectful of ourselves, our family, our staff? Or are we being respectful of our responsibility as setting a model for the rest of America? I'm afraid not. Now there is remaining this bill that just passed the House of Representatives, the Families First coronavirus legislation. Can I ask consent that the Senate be in order?
The Senate will be in order. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Coronavirus Act was one that was negotiated by Speaker Nancy Pelosi and the President of the United States through Mr. Mnuchin. That negotiation went on for a week, and a bill was agreed to and supported by both. The President even tweeted his support for it. That just shows his level of commitment, I suppose. And Speaker Pelosi supported it as well. It was a measure that should have passed by a voice vote here in the United States Senate over the weekend, and instead we're still talking about it today. There are measures included in that are critical for public health. May I give you one example? When the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago asked for protective masks for healthcare workers so that they could avoid infection, they sent us an allotment of 25,000 masks. A state of 12.5 million people, 25,000 masks. Those would protect the people working at one major hospital in Chicago for a month. Totally inadequate. The last time we faced any kind of epidemic threat like this, we received 1.5 million masks from the stockpile. What's holding up the masks? What's holding up the test kits? Those are legitimate questions. One of the provisions in this bill that is still sitting here somewhere in Senate limbo would authorize new masks to be released across the United States, to my state and others. So while we talk, the masks are not being delivered. Why then aren't we taking up this bill tonight? The coronavirus bill should be taken up at this moment by unanimous consent. Let those who object to it come to the floor if they wish and object, and explain why. If they have an amendment to offer, so be it. But if it's just to let the ordinary course of things work their way through, and maybe we'll get around to this by Wednesday or Thursday, shame on us. This is a matter of national emergency and a public health crisis in this country, and what kind of example are we setting by coming back to this chamber at risk to our staff and the people and ourselves and our families? We have members of the Senate going in and out of quarantine, self-quarantining themselves, and we're acting like it's business as usual. We'll get around to this sometime later this week. What are we waiting for? This is a healthcare emergency. It's time for both political parties to come to the floor, not this empty chamber, and do our job tonight. There is no excuse for it. If someone has a substantive objection to the bill, state it on the floor. You've got plenty of chance to do it. Offer an amendment if you wish, or just vote no. But for goodness sakes, the American people expect us to do our work. We're here at risk to ourselves and others. We should do our work and do it quickly. And if this is going to end up in some voice vote that is quietly registered tomorrow, a number of us are going to be very upset, because we've made this trip here because we had to represent our people that elected us, sent us here, thinking that we would have to vote. If we can do this without a vote, so be it, but couldn't this have been done without exposing all of the staff people and all of the protective forces and everyone else to the obvious pandemic that we think is threatening our country in a massive way? I take this very seriously because I love my family and friends. I wouldn't want any of them to be hurt because of something that I have picked up, some virus that I have picked up. I've increased my exposure today to be here on this floor, and tonight we're going to quietly sneak away and maybe come back tomorrow and actually do some work. We should do it tonight. This coronavirus emergency should be taken seriously by both parties and taken seriously by the United States Senate. It's time for us to act. That's what we're sent here to do. Let's do it.